Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Coach and Benway podcast. This is the Weekly Bile for November 10th, 2018. And boy, oh boy, did we have a week. Dr. Benway, how's it going?
I'm ready for part two.
Because we basically had this was a two-episoder, right? The previous episode was called The Midterm Hangover, and here's the one where we're going to talk about the other things that happened in the news, quite apart from the midterm elections and some of the fallout of the midterm elections. So, Benway, why don't you kick it off with the first thing that's going on?
Well, I guess the first thing that's going on is all of a sudden you give the Democrats enough time, they'll find more votes to count.
Oh yeah,
particularly in Florida and Arizona, but Florida is getting more of the attention. Especially my two favorite counties in all of Florida, Broward County and Palm Beach County.
Yeah.
Both so-called Democratic strongholds. Lo and behold, oh my God, I just happened to find this box of 80,000 votes.
Yeah.
In the back of my school polling. I don't know, but could be. I don't know where they came from, but we got to count all the votes. People who pay attention to Florida politics know that those two counties are incredibly suspect when it comes to this matter. They're always the last counties to report. They always seem to just happen to find something for you, and it always seems to be in one side's favor over the other.
Yeah, they're basically the Cook County of the 21st century. You just wait around for the election, and they'll give you the votes you need for victory if you're a Democrat. Why is it that the Democrats always steal elections? Because it's never the Republicans. It's always the Dems. The Dems are always the ones who have like this machine somewhere in some county across the United States, in some important state, where they can just manufacture the necessary votes. I just don't get it. But anyway,
well, I think each side has their strategy for pushing the votes to their side or the other. For the Democrats, their strategy invariably involves getting more and more votes. And this will involve, I happened to discover this box of ballots that just happened to be in the back of my car. The fact that they all look like they were written in my handwriting, never you pay attention to that.
Yeah.
The Republican strategy is the opposite. It's to generally keep people from voting that they don't want to. So this is either ensuring, that people with criminal past don't vote. Poor people don't vote, ballot suppression. That's the kind of two strategies that are generally at play. You can justify one or the other. It's like, it's funny to me whenever people say, there's just been no demonstrable example of elections being stolen since this, that, the other. And I keep laughing because this country has had a recorded history of stuffing ballot boxes and quote stealing elections fair and square. You know what I mean? Like voting early, voting off. This is well known that this is what this country did. And yet you have to accept this progressive notion that sometime magically in the 1960s, we all came to our senses and perfectibility of our political system. It says, under no condition has anyone ever materially affected the outcome of election give me a fucking break.
Yeah, I don't get it because, I come from Chile, right? And in Chile, I'll explain very briefly the voting mechanism. It's incredibly strict, okay? Any election that's going on in Chile and a lot of other Latin American countries are on the up and up because this is Chile and this is the experience I saw, okay? You show up at your election polling station, right? Now, you're assigned. Everybody has a ID card, a national ID card, and a national ID number. You have to carry it with you to the election, of course. Now, you show up at your polling station. You look at a list of names, and it's not even names. It's just a range of numbers for your ID and tells you which room to go to, because usually this takes place in a school. And you go to that room, and in that room, there's going to be a long table with representatives of all of the major parties, usually like 5, okay? And then there's going to be what's called the chief of the table, okay? And the chief of the table has this stack of votes and a big book. Okay. Now the stack of votes, it's a paper with a little coupon attached to it, that you can break off, like on stamps, it's that you can rip off. And see, on that little coupon is a serial number. Okay. And so what happens is that your ID, your number ID, is correlated to the serial number of the vote. Okay. So they give you the paper ballot. They write down your ID number. They write down the serial number of your vote. You take the piece of paper with the little coupon, and you go over to a little station, a little polling place with where they have a pencil, and you just simply vote for the person. And the way you vote is there is a horizontal line for all of the candidates, and the candidates you want, you simply put a vertical line, right? And then you fold it up as per instruction. And if you don't know how to fold it up, they actually show you how to fold it up because you're supposed to fold it in a specific way. You take it back to the table, and they take your vote, they pull off the coupon, and then they put your ballot into a glass box. Well, that's actually acrylic plastic box, right? And so everybody can see all the votes as they accumulate, right? And the little coupon with the serial number, they paste it in that book right next to your name, okay? So that proves that, and they also make you put your thumbprint right next to it. It sounds like a long process as I explain it to you, but because of this process, number one, there is no way to figure out who voted for who. Because once the coupon is torn from the ballot, and the ballot, of course, is sealed, you have no idea. It's just in the box, right? Every person who voted is correlated to an individual vote, okay? So there's simply no way to cheat the system. And this is what's interesting. I've noticed that these kinds of very strict systems happen in countries where there is very little social trust, i.e. there is a great deal of mistrust that somebody or other is trying to fuck the system and stuff the ballots. And it's really interesting because it seems to me that greater paranoia on this particular issue leads to a more transparent and more true election result because you know for a fact. And that's why in Chile the voting results come out 100% 2-3 hours after the end of the election, because it's very strict and transparent and efficient and very monotonous in the sense that everybody has to do exactly the same thing. There aren't voting machines or different kinds of systems in different kinds of counties. I don't understand why in the United States they don't do something similar. Why don't they implement some sort of national system that's paper ballots, because that way you always have a physical evidence of something. It's not just a computer or a machine. And, be done with it. I just do not understand this.
Well, it's because the election boards are not run nationally. They're run state by state and often county by county. Each has the ability to set their own rules. And I'm willing to bet that you're never going to get them to all agree on anything, in part because there is political motivation to prefer one type of balloting over the other. Your guess as to why they want that, I'll leave to your imagination.
Yeah, I think
what's interesting, what's particularly interesting about Broward County, like I said, it's a known quantity. But more important than that, the election supervisor of that county, Brenda Snipes, who everybody knows her reputation because she has been caught fucking around with ballots, not once, twice. And she still has the job. She still has the job. And like we're going into 48 hours plus after the election.
No, more. And more. 30 it was 72 hours plus. It was Tuesday, right? And we were recording this Friday night. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 72 hours.
So like a day ago, it was 40 some odd hours past the election, and she still was not in a position to tell to the media or other people in the fucking state how many ballots she still has outstanding. I'm still trying to figure out how much more I need to get to win this election for my side. Basically. Is essentially the answer.
This shit does not happen in a third world country. It does not happen in third world countries. I just explained how it doesn't happen in fucking Chile, which is a third world country. Good God, these fucking people. What? I'm sorry. I'm just outraged by it.
Well, I mean, it's something I actually kind of expected in 2016. I assumed just the numbers just wouldn't enable it to get there. But what was interesting about this one, it isn't just that, this is happening. It's that the pushback is being very loud and very quick. So because it's going to potentially cost not just the Senate seat that we probably won in Florida, but also the governorship. We're now very, very close in the number of ballots, and we're going into hand recount territory. Cal Surprise is just enough to get us there. It's almost as if someone had planned that. But needless to say, the Republicans in Florida, including of all people, our little Marco Rubio, has said flat out, this is bullshit what's going on, and has been tweeting constantly a big thread about this. And then the president picked it up and said, "You're not going to fucking steal this election. We'll basically send more lawyers down there than you know what to do with."
Yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be resolved by judiciary. I think eventually they're going to take it to the courts, and I think that Broward County votes in particular, they're going to have to invalidate them because it's too much. It's too many votes that just magically appeared, and it doesn't make any sense. It might make sense if it's like 3-2, but not 9-10. That 9-1 rather. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense when it's that egregious. That 50,000 vote majority that the Republicans had. I forget in which of the two races. It keeps getting eroded, and all of the erosion comes only from one county. It does just no. Come on. Don't shit a shitter. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it was like the judiciary in I forget. I think it's Florida. I don't think it's a national or federal judiciary, but they basically gave a summary opinion in favor of the Republicans, saying, no, you have the right now to inspect what the fuck's going on, and it could very well lead to, no, you're stopping all the counties we're approaching, invalid vote territory, and we're probably going to exclude
the fact that the senator from Florida, Marco Rubio, and the president of the United States are both tweeting about this thing. Yeah, tweets don't carry any kind of legal weight, obviously, but it's enough to point to the attention. And so the fact that this is going to be resolved in terms of the law enforcement, I think is a really interesting thing. And what's interesting is who the U.S. Attorney General is going to be during that whole proceeding. Matthew Whitaker, the replacement of Jeff Sessions. I want to turn to this first because we actually had another topic that was going to talk first, but I want to pivot over to Whitaker because I'm realizing he's going to be the guy who's going to be handling this thing. Now, Jeff Sessions, as everybody knows, resigned, quote unquote, got fired. And, there are a lot of people who are being bandied about as potential replacement. But the interim replacement is a guy called Matthew Whitaker. Now, Matthew Whitaker is this jacked guy. He's like 6'3", 6'4", right? Bald. He works out on his Twitter. He has this shot of himself lifting like God knows how many, like weights, right? He's like this huge guy. He is a hardcore Trump loyalist. He is hardcore right. You could argue that he is almost alt. Okay, he's almost going there, right? And apparently, from his social media, he's on top of a lot of things. He knows about Gamergate. He knows about all kinds of stuff that our people, our crowd, you who are listening to us, you care about. Well, this guy seems to know about this shit and is on our side of those particular issues. He's going to be the interim attorney general. The reason he's going to be the interim attorney general was that he was the the chief of staff of Jeff Sessions. Now, here is the key issue that I find really funny. Because of this breakdown in the election, this purple pudding that we got, right? Because it's not red, it's not blue, it's just this purple mush. The purple pudding is going to make it so that nobody's going to be able to decide on the new attorney general for many, many months. And in those many, many months, Matthew Whitaker is going to, he's going to have the run of the candy store, if you will. He'll be able to do whatever the fuck he wants. And here's the key issue. He has no business in the whole Russia investigation. So he is directly supervising the Robert Mueller investigation. So it's going to be a beautiful thing.
A few things here to why everybody's on the Democratic side is freaking out about this. One, ordinarily one would pass the role of acting attorney general from the exiting attorney general to the deputy attorney general. In this case, would have been Ron Rosenberg or Rosenstein. But the issue, obviously, as we all know, is Rosenstein has been in the media as being, shall we say, willing to wear a wire to expose President Trump. His accusations against his character are sufficient enough to where it seems reasonable that you would bypass him. So Trump went to basically the chief of staff as the acting attorney general. Now, the Democrats are freaking out about this in part because, yes, they know that he's probably going to be watching like a hawk the Mueller investigation. He's publicly said in the past he doesn't believe there's any collusion there. He also, I think, had said, I can't confirm this though, but that like the way that you could deal with the Mueller investigation is to not disband it, but basically just drop its budgeting down to zero and then bring them to a halt. So that they're pissed about that. So they're demanding that he has to recuse himself and this, that, and the other. He has no business recusing himself. It was already kind of spurious that Sessions had to recuse himself on this matter. So they want that. The other thing the argument that they're trying to make is that, well, this is a substantial enough role. He should be validated by the Senate. I think the Washington Post is running an article or an opinion piece that, quote, there is no way this man should be running the Justice Department. This is the number one opinion piece on Washington Post. And the funny argument they're making is like, oh, it's substantial enough. He needs to be subject to Senate review and basically approval of the appointment. And the argument that Levine is making is that which I think is a good one, is that number one, he's temporary, he doesn't need to be approved by the Senate in any capacity, and number two, if you think it's a material enough role, then his question to them is, well, then shouldn't Mueller have been approved by the Senate before we established him as a special counsel? Because it's a similar situation. In fact, it's worse because Mueller has no stop date. He has not been, officially vetted. It was just appointed. Where does one end and the other begin? His point being that, well, you're just looking for what benefits your side versus the other. It's a perfect shit show for them to freak out about, since obviously, like I said, the election didn't entirely go their way. It did not go their way. And I think I was just reading an article from the Daily Beast that was, I guess this happened tonight or something. I don't remember watching it. But Bill Maher, of all people, because he's apparently the voice of the Democratic Party. Trump has crossed the red line by appointing Matthew Whitaker as Attorney General. I don't even know that Bill knows how to draw a red line unless it's across a hooker's ass with cocaine underneath it.
Well, no, I think that it's, the whole notion of approving Whitaker, it's just absurd. The guy was the chief of staff of Jeff Sessions. Now, Jeff Sessions' recusal, by the way, I always thought that was sort of like bullshitty on his part. I think that basically he just didn't want to deal with the hassle, the political hassle. So he was like, oh, I'll just recuse myself on this very, this fig leaf of a reason. And that way he didn't have to deal with it and just like fobbed it off to Rosenstein. Also, Sessions is, if not a never Trumper, he's certainly not that sympathetic to Trump. He's certainly not sympathetic to the working class nationalism, which Trump represents.
Hold on a second. I think this is a little bit unfair, and it's missing a key, his point in how this happened. Sessions actually was one of the earliest supporters of Trump. He has been very big on the anti-immigration point and everything. What happened was this was when Sessions, after his review by the Senate, or during the review by the Senate, said he never interacted with the Russians, what have you, got appointed. And then someone was looking through and found that, he had a dinner date with a Russian during the either the campaign or like during the interim period, and they were freaking out about that, and they were going to attack him, and people thought that Trump might cuck and send Sessions out. It was around this time that Sessions says, I'm not leaving, I'm not resigning, but I'll recuse himself. So basically, they had a blade over his head. Rosenstein, in typical fashion, said, "You might recuse yourself, maybe," and he did. And to the fury of the president never forgave him for this, and it's been a thorn in his side for over 2 years. It's been the biggest challenge, and Sessions, for all he's been doing, trying to handle immigration, sanctuary cities, what have you, has not been pushing hard on some of the other matters, and ultimately, just gave too much ammunition to the other side with regard to the Mueller investigation. And for, of all things, he's been obsessed with policing marijuana. So I think you combine all those things, no great loss from the president's perspective right now, particularly if Whitaker is with him much stronger on a number of other matters, and on top of everything else can say fuck you to the Mueller probe, and you're not kicking me out. I get to review every last goddamn thing you're seeing.
By the way, dear audience, I totally fucked that up. It totally slipped my mind, and for some reason I just got a little bit confused, and just blame it on the Alzheimer's. Sorry, guys, and thanks, Benway, for totally correcting me on this. But anyway, going back to the Sessions, the Matthew Whitaker thing, What do you think is going to be moving forward? Because, yeah, I'd heard him, Whitaker, before he joined the Justice Department, that he was basically saying that the way to end the Mueller investigation was just to step on their oxygen tube. Just, step on the money until it sort of like just grinds down or becomes, for all intents and purposes, useless. Because, an investigation like this it's extremely expensive, and it's at the discretion of the Justice Department. You think that that's going to be his approach? I mean, it would seem like the best approach, really.
What do you think is the best approach? I didn't quite follow.
The best approach would be to just step on the money spigot, cut Mueller's money, and what's the guy going to do? He's just going to have to start cutting staff, and just going to grind down, because this endless investigation is going nowhere. It's just what is being produced? Yeah, they handed out indictments to 13 Russians who basically were trolling. And on top of that, one of them actually is defending himself, showed up in court and to defend himself. I wonder who is financing that. I'm assuming Putin, just to fuck with these people, right? But anyway, they're not really doing anything. They have not gotten any kind of smoking gun. They haven't gotten any serious indictment except, what's that name? Papadopoulos, whatever his name is, and I'm not even clear as to what he was indicted for. I mean, it just seems like it's just a big old gas bag.
Well, everybody who has been indicted for process crimes outside of the Russians. You said one thing during an interview, but it was really something else. You're a motherfucker. We're going to take you to prison. That's basically was the Manafort situation. Plus, things that he was doing independent of the president, like, advocating on behalf of Ukraine. And it was funny how people use that as example. See, foreign meddling, collusion there. Actually, if you look at what he was advocating on behalf of internationally, it was for the Ukraine against Russia and in favor of the meddling in Ukrainian politics. In other words, what the left-wing establishment would prefer us to be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's all a fucking farce. As to whether or not, they're going to control the spigot of money and that's how they're going to be to manage it, could be. I think at this point, more than anything else, Trump just wants someone who's actually paying attention to know what the fuck is going on. Since Session has recused himself, and it's been like a black hole for the president. He doesn't know what's going on. It's something of a surprise. Well, I think at this point, that's no longer a surprise since Whitaker says, I get to see everything, motherfucker.
Now, do you happen to remember how the confirmation process for an AG goes?
I think it's... I don't remember exactly. I think the full Senate has to vote, but like the judicial appointment, there is a committee that's going to review, and they'll grandstand and ask their stupid questions.
Yeah.
And then it gets passed to the full Senate to vote.
Okay, so what we can expect is the following: the new Congress is going to be seated in January 20th, I believe, right? And so that nothing's going to happen between now and January. And then that confirmation process, they'll float a name out there and they'll start the investigation and wind it up. I mean, maybe they'll start the FBI investigation now, and by the time the new Congress is seated, they'll hit the ground running insofar as the confirmation of the next Attorney General. Now, the Republicans are going to have at least 53 votes, if not 54 votes, in the Senate, depending on if the Democrats successfully steal the Florida Senate seat, right? So that'll mean that the Republicans will get whomever they really want, right? So we won't see a new Attorney General until at least mid-February. I mean, I would guess that that's like the earliest this will happen. So we'll have what's left of November, December, January, and let's say all of February. So we basically have like 3.5 months. Now, the key issue with Whitaker is that since he's the chief of staff, he knows what's going on. He knows what's going on in the whole Justice Department right at that second. And I would think that he would have started making moves that are pro-Trump, pro-Republican, pro-right-wing from the second Session left the door. I mean, and he knows which levers to push, as opposed to somebody who's new, some new Attorney General, who's going to take a few months to find his feet and figure out what's going on. So I think that insofar as the Justice Department is concerned, these next few months, these next 4 months, are going to be really interesting, because the Justice Department, precisely because this guy is so up to speed, is going to be able to do so many things, probably be much more effective than Sessions himself. And here's an interesting question. Suppose they float somebody out there, and this nominee blows up for whatever reason. Do you think that possibly Matthew Whitaker remains as the Attorney General? Or do you think also that, a follow-up question to that and a possibility, do you think that maybe Trump decides to just simply stretch out the search for a new Attorney General and have Whitaker in the job, as long as possible? Instead of 4 months, just stretch out the process, and it's easy to stretch it out if you want to. Stretch it out into 6 months, 9 months, a year. You see what I'm saying?
Well, he can do a lot of things. He could ultimately decide that Whitaker's his guy and put him through the process. The other matter is, to your point, he can keep him on as the temporary guy, and if the new Congress continues to grandstand and drag this out, I mean, Whitaker is effectively the Attorney General for the time being.
Yeah.
And as long as he wants. So he can do whatever he really wants on that matter. I'm not particularly worried about it too much. I think what's interesting is the Democrats will no doubt try to push something along the lines of, oh, we're going to try and push legislation so Mueller can't be fired, even though that would be unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And a variety of other things. And, and it's funny that they always keep playing the extremist language, like Chuck Schumer gets up in his shaky way and says, this is a constitutional crisis. And all
I know.
other kind of...
What the fuck is that all about?
It's a constitutional crisis when it doesn't go my way, don't you see?
Yeah. I mean, it seems to be the case, every fucking time. And the thing is, see, they keep calling Drumpf, Nazi and bigot and all the rest of it, anti-Semite and so on and so forth. And see, where's the smoking gun? Where's the video? Where's the audio? Yeah, he said grab him by the pussy. Okay, so he's a sexist pig. Fine, he's a sexist pig. But where's all the other stuff? There's nothing. That's the thing. And I'm figuring that by 2020, if they keep on going the way that they're going, the Democrats are going to get BTFO'd. I mean, because there's nothing there. But anyway. Moving on from the Jeff Sessions whole thing, let's go on to the Tucker Carlson house being mobbed. Jesus fucking Christ. I thought that was fucking low.
We mentioned this in the earlier episode because it was happening at the time. To me, like I had said at the time, because it was before the media had any chance to react to it. I say, let's see how this plays out. I had said at the time that Fox had better say something very public about it and be very public about it, because otherwise it's going to just fade into the background and it won't reach the attention of important people like the president, who we know watches Fox News. Well, they did cover it. Tucker made it very clear what was going on. Apparently his wife was at home in the kitchen, either waiting to make dinner or waiting to go out to dinner. And all of a sudden she hears the loud clamoring and banging at the door. She thought it was effectively a home invasion. Had to basically hide in the pantry until this all settled down. They actually did smash his door and a number of other things. So you had that element. Fortunately, Fox News made publicly what was going on in detail. And in addition to that, the next thing I said is, let's see what all the other media says about this. Some people, especially at CNN, I must admit, were smart enough to know that they couldn't outright say anything stupid about it, but they were as lukewarm about it as possible. I remember like Oliver Darcy, I think, the guy who's the social media focused member, the one who's always trying to get Alex Jones kicked off the internet because he accosted me in the hallway and said I'm a stupid. He said, this isn't really good to hit journalists at home. It's like not cool, guys. Like that was about the extent of it. The worst perpetrator, and this is a fun story, was is it Matthew Iglesias, the economist, I put that in scare quotes, writer for Vox, amongst other places. He used to work at Slate, I remember. But he's working primarily at Vox, and he had a whole series of tweets, effectively to the extent of, well, I understand where this is coming from. I mean, Tucker actually makes a lot of Americans live in fear, and through his approval of basically genocide against minorities. And he says, technically, I understand this is probably a bad idea, but I have no sympathy for Tucker's wife and what she's going through. It just doesn't stack up against the pain Tucker causes. Yeah. Literally, they chanted in front of this woman's house, we know where you sleep at night. Yeah. And, you're getting out of this community. It was a threat. Yeah. It was an organized, vicious threat. Fox News covered those tweets as well. The following night, it says, this is the reaction you're getting from the media. immediately after that Fox News coverage, as I was chatting to a few people through Twitter live when it was happening, he cut off not just those tweets, but all tweets on his account. It's as if he never tweeted.
Yeah.
So someone at Fox probably told him, "Look, motherfucker, you're making us look bad. Fix it." And this is how he fixed it.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting is that though he was the face of this, I think that most people on the left, most people in journalism, think the same thing. Now that is we got a serious problem if we have most journalists thinking the same thing, because they're having a complete meltdown over Jim Acosta losing his credentials to the White House. Big fucking deal, right? It's just an administrative move. It doesn't mean anything. And all the other press people can go as much as they want to, okay? It's just Acosta. It's just one guy. Who cares, right? They're having a freak out over Jim Acosta. But Tucker Carlson's his family was harassed to the point that it would have been reasonable if she'd had a shotgun or something to go out there and start blazing away, because it looked like a fucking invasion. I mean, their video made it seem all they needed was fucking pitchforks, for crying out loud. It looked like they were going there to lynch this guy's family. I mean, I thought it was outrageous.
You could hear people on the videos laughing and joking about mail bombs. Maybe we'll send you a mail bomb or something to that effect. That was the impetus of what you could potentially hear on the audio. So certainly there was that. And my attitude towards this is, very cold, but very useful, which is to say, look, the media will no doubt go on its self-righteous fart-sniffing rant about how the freedom of the press and these glorious institutions of the United States are under threat, and in their minds they think Trump is the reason it's under threat. Yet this, mob mentality from the likes, against Tucker Carlson's family, we can't be bothered to spend most of our time thinking about that. We have to figure out whether or not Paul Joseph Watson sped up the video of Jim Acosta, resisting to give up the microphone in order to prove whatever. I mean, it is the very absurd situation, but it also makes sense. They have the media collectively, whether it's top down or just organic, has their attitude as to what matters, and they will ignore facts to the contrary or ignore where their profession is really getting squeezed. So this is why you just don't take them seriously. It's politically motivated, treated as such. It is not objective fact. Anybody in your Jeb exclamation point who thinks that prostrating yourself to the media is somehow going to make people respect you is a fucking idiot. That's why he only got 3% of the primary vote, if that. Keep that in mind. Don't trust anything they say. You have no reason to trust anything they say.
Yeah, and I think that, insofar as Tucker Carlson, I think that if this must have blackpilled the ever-living shit out of him. I haven't been able to see it. I mean, being in Ukraine, I can't see U.S. news, right? Or it's not easy to come by it. So I haven't seen his reaction to this. Have you? And what was it?
He hasn't been on television to talk about it, as far as I know. He was on the phone with people on Fox News talking about it. I'm sure he's staying home to keep an eye on the family. He basically said, "Look, I tend to be like a reasonable person about these things, but it's at that point where I don't feel comfortable letting my kids stay home alone in the house anymore. I feel like some sort of security protection has to be there." And he goes through the various reasonable attitudes that you would take in response to this, because it was basically an assault on the family. I mean, frankly, if something had actually happened to his family, I could easily imagine Tucker Carlson becoming like Paul Kersey in Death Wish. I mean, that level of kind of breakdown that would come from that. I mean, who could blame him?
Yeah, I don't think anybody. Look, I think that the guy said that he was going to take a few days off to straighten out his head, and I think also it's a smart thing because of the anger and impotence that he must be feeling. Okay, because he was not there because he was probably off at work. Because the kind of job that he has is it's a 14-hour days kind of job, right? And so probably also as a parent myself, I would guess, and this is just strict speculation on my part, that a job like that entails a lot of time spent at the job, right? And because of that, it's a lot of time not spent with the family. And so the feeling that your family was for all intents and purposes, assaulted, and you weren't around, that must weigh on the guy very, very heavily. I mean, the guilt of that, and that guilt will manifest itself as anger. Quite apart from the fact that of how much he fears for the safety of his own family. Now, I would guess that he's going to go, not quite 1488, but fucking close. I mean, he's going to go black-pilled. And I think that it's going to get a lot more contentious. He's going to be a lot more going after Antifa and just really showing them. Now, he's a smart customer, quick on his feet. He's just a terrific journalist. So a guy like that who's just really realized these fuckers, these people on the left, it's unconscionable. And I think also, see, Tucker Carlson has always had a very chummy relationship with the Washington press establishment, even though everybody knows that he's on the right and what have you. He was always like, they're almost like their pet Republican. I think that this is like the final straw for him, especially the lukewarm response of the mainstream established media, because I don't think that the press has really come out here and disavowed this whole thing. I'm talking New York Times, Washington Post, and he has relationships with all those people. He knows them. He's part of that crowd. I mean, socially at least, if not politically. And so it must be just really devastating to realize that the people the people you work with, that, yeah, you have different political opinions perhaps, but we're all colleagues. We have a collegiate experience. We're on the same boat professionally. He's all of a sudden realizing, no, these fuckers want me dead, want my family hurt, because they're not saying anything. I think that for this guy, it's going to be a major turning point, to tell you the truth. And I think it matters because Tucker Carlson is, number one, the face of Fox. And he personally is a popular guy because he's so likable. He's such a likable individual. And so I think his return, I mean, when he comes back on camera, that'll be something that, when he shows up, because I bet he's going to address this directly, and it'll probably be fucking devastating. You see what I'm thinking?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just has to wait until see what it happens. I mean, it's not going to not affect him by any means. I think the other little detail around this that I'm kind of curious about is, and I think others have noticed it. Remember last year and change ago, there was that basically the weirdly gay professor at John Jay University that, like Mike Isaacson, the one who was always like, oh, fucking pigs. And, I really feel happy that they die. Tucker, basically brought him on the show more or less to show how much of an idiot he is. And apparently there's a chance that he's vaguely connected to the Smash Racism DC organization. Vaguely. He says officially no. Like he says, I haven't worked with Smash Racism DC in 3 years, but support their actions. Thanks for playing. This was his most recent pin.
Oh, tweet. What a dickhead.
And he was saying, like, Tucker Carlson, this is his quote regarding Tucker. Blue, my family can't be safe while I advocate for the bloodthirsty separation of thousands of families at the border. Why I can't leave my kids at home while I callously brush off the murder of another black child at the hands of the police. Tucker Carlson's home is incredibly not on fire, so someone is practicing restraint. So this pretty much, if it isn't, working with Smash Racism DC, you can certainly tell the extent to which people think this guy, or at least people beyond that organization within the far left, basically approve of it. I would certainly love to see someone smash Mike Isaacson's face into the pavement, but I know I'm a good Christian person, so I'll simply not respond to it while it happens.
What a fucking cocksucker. Damn, man. I mean, like, okay, like, look, it's sort of like not only it adds to the point I made, but I think also the following, that it's just going to start radicalizing normies towards our side. I think a lot more normies, I mean, anybody reasonable who's just watching this from the outside is going to be saying, what the fuck? Because these are policy differences, and you are saying that it's okay to go and, for all intents and purposes, assault a family of a journalist who is just, does not believe hook, line, and sinker, the policy option of an opposing party. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about fucking policy. And you're willing to harass and intimidate a suburban family who didn't do anything. I mean, they're suburban people who are just living in their house, and the suburbs are, by all intents and purposes, incredibly vulnerable. But the whole notion is that we're all living in a civil society such that we would never dream of going and harassing somebody like that. That's why people don't live, behind moats or some shit like that, right? I find it absurd, and I find it absurd that the Democrats, the leadership of the left, the face of the political leadership of the left, is not going out there and saying this is fucking wrong. Because have the Democrats even mentioned this issue? Have they come out and said, oh, this is a bad thing?
Well, I haven't been looking for their response actively, so I couldn't tell you. I couldn't prove the negative so easily. But at the very least, I'm not seeing it, proactively pushed around. That says it's not like Bernie Sanders is going around and being covered by the media saying, "Oh, this is not the good thing." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean they haven't said it. It just means it's not being, pushed in any dramatic kind of way.
No, I think that this is just absurd. I think
but what is being pushed by the left-wing media is apparently people have been much too mean to Ocasio-Cortez by making fun of the fact that she can't afford to live in D.C. until they pay her monies because she's poor, So this has been a thing. Apparently, people were making fun of the fact that Ocasio-Cortez has been bitching and moaning. He's like, I don't have money, so you really can't live in D.C. and find rents until they start paying me. So this is kind of rough. And people basically said, you entitled millennial brat, again, you can't manage your savings. But of course, the left-wing media turn around and says, this just shows you how the Republicans don't care about working class people. and what's funny about this one, I'm like, if there was any time when that argument was going to fall flat, it's now. The Democrat Party has been and will continue to be a corporatist party. The only party that's making very strong moves to a working class supporting party is, frankly, the Republicans, particularly the middle America working class. Ocasio-Cortez, if she's working class by either choice or by fuck up.
Yeah.
We all know she came from a very wealthy suburb of New York. I believe the same wealthy suburb you grew up in.
Yeah.
Certainly nothing to sneer at. She went to, Boston University. There's no reason she had to be working as a barmaid, which is what she was doing. It's a manifestation of her own fuck up. But she's turning around and saying things like, thanks for the support, everybody. It's like, however, it's been very revealing to see how gleefully Fox News hosts crack jokes about working class people. It reveals what they actually think about us. And you can just imagine her eyes circling within her head, ready to pop out.
The Sampaku eyes, yeah.
The Sampaku eyes. I mean, cry me a fucking river. I do not see her as working class anything. I see her as barely a human being to start with.
Yeah.
There's nothing particularly impressive about her, except that, her district is, apparently just very interested in having a Sampaku-eyed representative.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be cool? I am not ashamed of making fun of her for that. I will continue to be making fun of her for everything she does because she's so goddamn funny.
Yeah.
And, the day she's working class is the day I'm the Emperor of Japan.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a key issue. See, I understand that she's a young woman. She's 28, 29, I think, right? And that she might not have a capital buffer. I mean, the fact of the matter is she was a bartender or whatever for a while. She was sort of like a fuck up for a while. But that's perfectly fine. It's understandable. And the fact that she's young means that she hasn't accumulated that much capital. And also, do keep in mind that the life that she's been living over the last year or so, it's been on campaign funds. And it's perfectly justified for her to go to hotels and this and that, using campaign funds. But you can't use those campaign funds for personal use. And the fact that she's been running, probably the rent of her actual home or whatever, she's had to pay out of her own pocket or whatever minuscule savings she has. So all of a sudden, the move from New York to Washington is extremely expensive for somebody in her circumstances, and she doesn't have the wherewithal to pay for it. I understand that. And I understand also that it would be a very simple thing for her to get in touch with the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and say, look, I have this problem. I know it's really embarrassing, but I don't want to go public with it. Can you guys arrange for me to do like some speaking gigs so I can scrape together some cash so I can make this move? Because it's, I don't want to go out and beg for money, basically. But no, instead of doing that, she went out and begged for money. Which is just she's using it for political. Yeah.
Well, that's the issue. It isn't that there are ways to deal with the matter exactly as you said, which is basically, is there work I could do to basically get some extra money to fund this? That's what an adult does.
Yeah.
What a child does, and that's the issue. It isn't that her lack of money by virtue of being at her certain age, in and of itself.
No sin.
Isn't the issue. There's stories you can come up with to understand that. In my mind, the reason she is in that position and is publicly asking for money is representative of her lack of understanding of how to manage her life to a certain extent. Yeah. And what makes that egregious is this is someone who is in the chamber of legislative government that is in charge of the purse strings of the country.
Yeah.
That's why this is funny and scary, because if she's going to go around and say, someone's going to give me money to do this stuff. Just imagine like when it comes up for an appropriation bill, it's like, we just got to give ourselves money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's going to be the attitude and the thinking to have. And I will make fun of that continuously, because it should be.
Yeah. Because it should be made fun of. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't have. I mean, and this is what's I think laughed at much too easily in our country. There is something to be said of decorum and virtue when it comes to managing your affairs, right? And one way as you pointed out, of managing her affairs would be to privately, talk to people who are in position to help her, to say, this is kind of the situation. What can I do to help alleviate it? And that would have been fine. The fact that it's all like, oh man, this is so crazy rules. Everything's so expensive. Why don't people give me more money? That just shows you how much of a child she is. And it isn't a job for her to be a child. It's a job for her to represent her district. And if this is representation of her district, well, it's a district of children.
By the way, about the Ocasio-Cortez race, I was surprised that Crowley, who was on the ballot, he didn't make a push. He just decided to have a graceful exit. I'm kind of surprised at that, to tell you the truth. I thought that.
Well, I was just scrolling through Twitter, and I can't pull it up right now. But essentially, there was a survey I just passed through, which was it was from News Complex. 93% of Democrats think it's important that fewer whites be elected. I think this has been republished by VDare, so take that as you will. But that's probably why.
Yeah. I mean, he figured that he wouldn't win. Yeah. But probably that guy is so plugged in that I'm not going to be like shedding any tear for the guy. But I was kind of surprised because the guy was at almost like the threshold of great political power within the Democratic Party. And he lost in this stupid primary. I mean, it really was a fuck up on his part. He should have just paid more attention. And it was because it was just, what, like 3,000-4,000 votes? Nothing. He could have swung it if he'd, been paying attention. And he blew it. It's his own stupid fault, right? But anyway, so the Ocasio-Cortez, obviously she's going to be the poster girl for the Democratic Party insofar as, the under 30 set. What are they calling them now? Zoomers? Is that what they're calling them? All of these entitled little shithead children who don't know shit from Shinola. I wonder how long we will have to wait for her to start doing fuck up after fuck up, because she seems to be one of those people who the more scrutiny and attention she gets, the more she fucks up,
Well, that's why you've noticed there's more than one video talking about the fact that she has very heavy-handed handlers who basically prevent people from asking her legitimate questions.
Yeah.
Imagine her going into the House of Representatives and actually have to do something, and she's like, well, these questions are really hard. That's exactly how I think mentally she's going to process this situation. There's a lot of stuff. Why don't we just figure out ways to make it easy? I really have contempt for the person, as you know. What more can be said? What
Yeah.
more can I say?
Yeah. So anyway, look, we've sort of like gone. There isn't anything else that really has been happening in the news. Apparently, well, there was that shooting in Thousand Oaks, but a shooting in Thousand Oaks, tragic though it is, and I feel complete sympathy for the people involved and for the victims of the shooting. And I heard that there was some sheriff's deputy or somebody who like raced in with a first responder and raced in quite without thinking of his own safety, and he passed away. He was shot. I find that just really unfortunate. But there isn't anything intelligent to be said about that tragedy, or the tragedy in Melbourne, uh, where there was a South Asian, quote unquote, who committed a knife attack and killed one person and a couple of others, and there was a lot of chaos at the time. Those incidents, nothing really to say about that other than it's a tragedy, and well, tragedies happen every day. The other thing, though, that is a tragedy, but it's somehow like just desserts, this fire that's going on in California, and I saw this picture of
Malibu.
Malibu burning. Like, oh man, I'm like, oh, I'm not shedding a tear there. God loves us. God loves us and inflicts his holy fire on those who merit it.
Well, I mean, it's like, well, that's part, like, to your first point, like, what the only intelligent thing I can say about these shooting and violent attacks is, well, we've gotten so used to them that we can't even be moved to comment on them. And I think that's not just us. I think that's the world at large. It's like, oh, it's another one. It's part and parcel of living in a modern country, to
Well, yeah, but there's
paraphrase
there's
someone.
also the obvious thing. You know what my thinking has always been? It's not that there are these random shootings, it's that there are so few of these random shootings, these random attacks. Because you got to keep in mind the number of people out there. There are billions of people. There are what, 7.5, almost 8 billion people on this earth. And the fact that these random attacks and what have you, and knifings and shootings and what have you, they happen relatively rarely. Because you say, oh, they happen like once a month. Okay, fine. They happen once a month or twice a month, maybe. You could argue. Fuck it. You could say that they happen once a week. That is so few attacks compared to the population of just the Western democracies. I mean, the Western democracies, you're talking Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, right? Those are the Western democracies. And that's what? Roughly 700 million people. Between Europe has what? 350 million. And North America has another 350 million. And Australia, New Zealand has, I don't know, 20, 30. I actually don't know with precision, but I would guess it's around that figure. Okay, fine. 750 million people. In 750 million people, we have one attack, per week. One crazy per week. That's 50 people out of 750 million. You have a higher odds of winning the Mega Millions or whatever the fuck. I mean, come on. It's very little. And so I tend to look at these attacks as a tragedy, of course, for the people involved. I'm certainly not disparaging, not minimizing, rather, the pain and suffering that these people endure. But in the scheme of things, it's trivial. Because it really is. Because it's just these random shootings that, yeah. What I find always interesting is that always, 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 after every one of these shootings, the conspiracy theories pop up. And it's kind of like exhausting. Because my thinking is that all of these conspiracy theories, who's behind it? What do they claim is going on? And these conspiracy theories always fall apart when you start to actually examine them. But these people hold on to this. And that I find interesting, the conspiracy theories, not the shootings in and of themselves, because they're just, they're random. There's nothing to be done about them. But the conspiracy, the belief that, somebody's behind all of this, that there's like some Soros figure or somebody pulling the strings, and these random shootings, somebody's out there doing it, That's the only thing I find interesting, not because I believe any of this shit, but because I'm trying to figure out why there are so many people who need to believe that there is a higher order. And I guess it's just the fear of the randomness of life.
Well, need to believe or not, I think it's just the natural tendency of the humans to identify patterns and respond to them accordingly. I think it's the nature of how we're hardwired. We're always going to be that way. Some people will believe it to a larger extent than others. By and large, I think what the conspiracy theory at the most recent shooting was that, there was one of the people or a number of the people killed, I don't know, were survivors of the last that shooting in Las Vegas, whatnot. And they said, well, what does this mean? There's something behind that. It's like, well, the area that this recent shooting is relative to Las Vegas is actually not very far away.
Right.
So that in and of itself says it's not an impossible odds that it could be, you could be in both locations at this time. It's
not at all.
Shit luck. Very shit luck. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But it's not completely beyond the realm of the possible.
Yeah, and there were, by the way, in the Las Vegas shooting, there were tens of thousands of people essentially were exposed because this was outdoors and shit, right? And not only the people who were targeted by this shooter in that concert or whatever it was, right? There were also people out on the strip just walking around. So, and they were, quote unquote, victims too. They just happened to be out there. And well, fortunately for most of the vast majority of them, nothing happened, thank goodness. But yeah, it's reasonable for those tens of thousands of people that a lot of them, frankly, are going to be from the Southern California area. Yeah. So the odds are not, it's not unusual, to tell you the truth. But it looks unusual. It looks unusual when you don't really think about it. If it were like something like a shooting in, I don't know, in like outer Mongolia, and some of the victims had been at Las Vegas, well, that would have been much more interesting and more remarkable. But this, no, there's nothing there. But people find this need to seek patterns where there are none. And sometimes life is just random. And sometimes there's no big brain behind it all. And so I guess I want to leave us with that thought, that sometimes just shit happens and there's no big brain pulling the strings. Though perhaps it would
Which is why we should leave on the image of Ocasio-Cortez. There is no big brain behind these organizations.
No, there's no big brain behind the San Paco-eyed woman. Yeah, that's what
I don't really know all these details of how Congress runs. I mean, I can barely keep my checkbook, but I think I should deserve some position of power. I mean, okay, I get it. I won't be Speaker of the House, but like, what's number 2? I want to be
Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Yeah, we should give it to her. Nancy, make it happen. Yeah,
appropriations, like cultural appropriations. Like, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, I'm gonna have so much fun.
Yeah,
so much fun. With
somebody should tell her that the House Appropriations Committee is this committee of white people, and they figure out ways to culturally appropriate from the cool cultural stuff from all the little minorities. And if she's in that committee... Oh my God,
we got to shut this down. And then all of the libertarians in the crowd say, yes, do it.
Shut it down. Shut it down. Oh, man. She's like the ultimate NPC, isn't she? I mean, she really is. She's like the living embodiment of the NPC. Man, that chick is funny. And the worst part is that I think that she's actually going to have like some sort of political future. I think that the Democratic Party is going to figure, she's the youth vote. And they are going to hold on to her and parade her around. And like you said, all those handlers, right? She's like the ultimate puppet, the ultimate mannequin. We were talking the other day, it's an episode that's going to appear next week. We were talking about the movie Mannequin, a movie that both of us love, one of those guilty pleasures. That guilty pleasure episode is going to be next week. But she is like a mannequin. She is like the NPC mannequin of the Democratic Party, of what they imagine is the youth vote. The youth vote and the POC vote. Oh man, they're going to parade her around.
She's mannequin on the move. It is funny how a few years ago, all the self-righteousness of the left would have said, "Oh, if idiocracy is becoming real, it's because of all these white people and whatnot." Yeah. The reality of the idiocracy is that, well, no, it's just that the United States is becoming more like other third world countries, of which Ocasio-Cortez is certainly the chairwoman of. At this point, because it's just, I know there are smart women in this world, and she ain't one of them.
Oh no. And so on that cheerful note, this has been the Coach and Benway podcast, the Weekly Bile episode. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we will catch you next time. Take it easy.
Later.